All right, guys, welcome to Against the Grain Part 2 with Mike Romatowski of Mach 3 Speed Training. We are going to get into our fireside chat portion of this deal here. Where do you want to kick it off, Mike? You want to start with, let's start with something that's close to my heart. What was your biggest revelation as you started the Mach 3 training program? What did you discover as you built something special and something unique?
I would say that the acquisition of speed is actually a very easy thing to achieve. And that's important because I think in the old days, the message was, first of all, if you're over 25 years old, don't try it. Don't even bother. You're too old and you're going to get hurt. And the second message maybe back then was, and it takes a tremendous amount of physical training to change your body enough to where you can have more speed. But what we've really proven is you've got it in you already to a certain degree. So we can find that. That should be worth 2 to 8 miles an hour right there, just from the concept of speed out in front. And after that, you can train. And that should be worth another 2 to 8. So 4 to 16 is really what we've seen for the last 5 years, with the average being, I would say, club head speed average around 10 and ball speed average around 13. So that was very gratifying and very good to know that we were pretty much going to hit a home run with almost everybody that comes in. Very, very few exceptions.
Yeah, for those listening that don't understand what a gain that is, you said 12 miles an hour on average, 13 miles an hour on average?
Yeah, call it 12, yeah, on the average.
That's 2 clubs, right? So if you were hitting, 5-iron into a green, now you're smoking a 7-iron into the green, so huge advantage. Now, I asked this a little bit earlier, but I didn't want to cut you off. How long does it typically take for your average golfer to see that type of a gain? Is it really within grasp? When they hear 12 miles an hour, what types of input should they expect before they see that result? Because this industry is full of false promises and hope.
So this is interesting. First of all, nothing that comes out of my mouth in this interview here or in a workshop comes from any other place except what we've proven to ourselves to be true.
Sure. Well, if I didn't see a benefit, I wouldn't have you on.
Yeah, we don't, we're only teaching what we've proven to ourselves works the best. And along the way, there have been things that I would have sworn would help, and they didn't. And so those are long gone. And we're only left with the things that work the best. And actually, I got a huge compliment from an instructor in the New York Met section a few years ago. We actually did the workshop in New Jersey, but had a lot of guys from New York there. And he said, I really admire you for something. And I said, what? And he said, you're willing to put this on the line all over the country in front of a group of total strangers who you've never met. And you're saying that we should all get 2 to 8 miles an hour in the first 30 minutes. And I said, well, first of all, I only say that because I've seen it happen so many times that I'm confident in it. But again, all of these guys walked in with 2 to 8 miles an hour of speed that they simply aren't accessing. So we don't have to change your body for that at all. Right. If we had to change your body to get the first 2 to 8, we would be an epic fail.
Right.
Yeah, so it's already there.
I totally agree that that's a realistic gain. Again, just from the perspective of where they're creating the speed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's there. So then we paid careful attention to when people eventually leveled out, because you won't keep getting faster forever.
Right.
So most people level out between 3 weeks and 3 months after the first session. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't make more gains. It'll just be kind of more of a random thing beyond 3 months, like where you might go along for several months at roughly the same level, and then suddenly you'll jump up again. But I'm pretty confident to say 2 to 8 miles an hour in the first session, within minutes of learning about speed out in front, and then another 2 to 8 with 3 weeks to 3 months of training. And, that's happened over and over and over again. Now I've learned if somebody says, how fast can I get? I say, I have no idea, because we've seen some things that were so improbable that I learned just to keep my mouth shut and not put limits on anyone, because I don't know what the limits are. And we have a guy right now, he came in 4 months ago. He's from Houston. Big dude. He's probably 6'2", 250.
The big
And
boy.
he had what I would call good club head speed, but so ball speed in comparison. He was around 105 club head here and about 150 ball speed when we met him. But he's been training like a demon. And he reported in the other day at 121 club head speed and 179 ball speed.
That's nice.
So that's 29 miles an hour of ball speed in 4 months. So let's just round it off to 30. I mean, how many yards is that? That's what, 70, 80 yards? And
right, off the driver,
he's a
maybe.
good player. I mean, he's already like a +1 handicap. So that's not the norm. I mean, I would never say that's the norm, but it is possible. And he's one of a handful of guys, usually bigger, stronger guys, who simply were so inefficient in what they were doing that they just were nowhere near their potential. Right. And so when you give them the right tools with their strength that's already there, the gains are huge. And so I learned just to say, I really don't know. It's up to you.
Right. Now that kind of takes me into an interesting point. We see lots of different performance centers, performance schools for golf instruction, right? And we see kettlebells and we see heavy weights. And again, with my martial arts and wrestling background, bodybuilding was a little bit of my background before I got into the real heavy golf instruction side of stuff. I think a lot of people think that they need to go immediately into the gym and start slinging weights in order to get faster. And one of the first things that I typically do with a student is check range of motion. I want to analyze your body, see where your movements are, how much, range you have. And then I want to typically work on flexibility. Am I off base there? I think that flexibility is the first base to attack rather than going to the kettlebells and the strength training and all the dynamic training and stuff. When it comes to speed, what would you prescribe? Would you prescribe, let's say, yoga and some just a regular stretching regimen to kind of attack those limited ranges of motion? Or are we going to kettlebells and dynamic training in the gym?
So I would say you and I are a little bit different on that. And what I always tell people is, look, there have been great golfers who were not particularly flexible, but there's never been a great golfer who was weak.
Sure,
and there
sure,
never will be. So I consider it a game of strength, but then the question becomes, what kind of strength? Are you talking about how much can I bench press? How much can I squat? What kind of strength? And so to me, strength, I call it strength in relevant patterns, which is why all Mach 3 workouts take place within the general parameters of the swing. Whether it's a swinging tool or one of the rope tools, if you watch somebody doing Mach 3, you immediately go, I get that. I see what he's doing, sure. Right? So in terms of weight training, we did a 3-month off-season experiment in our first year, our second year maybe, in this gym. And I mean, you wouldn't know it by looking at me now, but I come from a weight training background. When I was in my 20s, in the spring and summer, I would train with bodybuilders, and in the fall and winter, I would train with power lifters. So I know my way around weight training protocols. So I designed what I thought was going to be a Grand Slam home run, and we all did it for 3 months in the wintertime, and everybody got stronger in their lifts, and everybody felt good, and everybody got slower, and everybody went back to their original speeds. So that's an epic fail. And it's an example of something that I really thought would work. because at that point I was still operating a little bit on theory. Well, that theory, I mean, we didn't even come close to having it help us. So we only actually have, I would say, 2 weight training exercises now. One is a hex bar deadlift off of blocks, and one is kettlebell swings, but not everybody does them, because I think weight training, you have to have the right type of body to benefit from it. And also, I think that overdoing those powerful sagittal plane lifts does not translate well to rotation.
Right.
So now let's take it one step further, because we're not sitting here. I'm not thinking, okay, what is everything I can do to get the speed that I want? I'm actually thinking, what is the least I can do?
Right. Well, that was my point. And I'm not against the weight training. Again, it's totally, you've got to be in the gym and get yourself into shape. But to your point, when we get into those if we're lifting properly, we're really isolating those movements. Okay. And a lot of times that will slow things down. My point is just that the first step for the average golfer,
right.
rather
I'm
than
getting to
gym,
that. Yeah.
Yeah, just
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So the system that we use for, I will call it mobility and stability, is called Rotex Motion. And it's and that is, I'm going to say, 50% responsible for our success, because what Rotex Motion does is give you a very controlled way of increasing joint ranges of motion, but also ensuring that you're strong in each new range. So that's what's important to me. I am all for increasing your range as long as you can project some strength in that range.
Right.
And so, yes, you are entirely on point when you want to assess range of motion early on. And most of the time, you're going to want to improve it, because as Americans, we're kind of made out of petrified wood, it seems like, because you know all the reasons. So that's the method that we use to increase range and make sure we're strong in the range.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. So why do you say the end of movement creates the motion? You said that a little bit earlier. You touched on it. You didn't get too deep into it. Track that a little deeper for us.
Let's go back to boxing. If you teach me how to punch somebody in the face and punch somebody in the knee, I will show you 2 different motions. Why?
Sure.
Because you showed me 2 different destinations.
Correct.
Right? So I need to know the end point. So I know, I call it where to flow to and where to draw from. And so in that sense, the end of the motion creates the motion.
Got it.
And so in golf, the killer move is the downward thrust. So let's say, this is how I explain it when I'm about to hit my drive. I have 1 bolt of energy. Where am I going to send it? If I send it down toward the ball, I'm dead, because the ball's not the end of the movement, right? It doesn't make any sense for me to send my 1 bolt of energy to a halfway point.
Right.
Go back to the right cross again. You already said you're going to teach me to punch to or through the back of the guy's head.
Yeah, through.
So that's my one bolt of energy is going to go through the guy's head. I'm not going to go toward the floor and then through his head, or toward the sky and then through his head. I'm going to go on the most direct route. So that's why I say you got to understand the end point, and then every move you make should be oriented to that point, not the ball, because the ball is a roughly halfway area, and the ball gets swept away by your move to the finish.
Okay. Yeah, you nailed it when you said flow. So we had Steve Yellen. I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Yellen and fluid.
I am very familiar with him. Yeah.
I had him on a couple of weeks ago. It was a great interview, and you just nailed it. It's that fluid motion factor that he talks so much about. We get so caught up on impact, because it's essentially the golf swing is, happening in those 3 inches of the ball, but they're just coincidental to the motion. Right. And that's kind of how we want to look at it. Like I'd like to teach my students, think about the divot. What's that divot going to look like? And then the ball merely just gets in the way. If you're controlling your arc, you're controlling your speed, you're releasing it into that divot, and through that divot, the ball will be there. But as soon
Yeah.
as we get striking the ball, we're fat, we're thin, we're casting it, we're releasing the energy a little early.
You know who was the Mach 3 poster child? Actually, Jack Nicklaus. Like, obviously, he knew nothing about Mach 3 or whatever, but if you watch his swing, you know how he always said, like, take it back low and slow. Well, we know now with modern equipment, we don't want to take it back slow, but the way that he had that wide takeaway, that takeaway comes from the end point. It doesn't come from the ball. You take away from the ball, you're going to be steep or
Right.
steeper.
Yeah.
He
That
was
deadly pickup.
taking away from the finish, and kind of every move he made was oriented to the finish. Like, watching him, I see a guy who I'm like, I wish you lived now. And
Yeah.
I mean, of course, he lives now. I wish you were at your peak now, and I could bring you up on a stage and go, watch this guy move,
Right.
because he is the epitome of the way that I think somebody should move. Not in every detail of his swing. His swing was geared to his body, but
Sure.
just that width and that flow and the power that he had out in front, like a mule kick.
Right.
He's like somebody I watch and go, God, that's like what I'm trying to get to come out of my mouth is what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. But now you got to think about his elbow. His elbow was he had a chicken wing, right? If you took away the chicken wing, is Nicholas still Nicholas? What would he have done on
Now,
tour?
yeah, I mean, and I read it on Facebook again the other day. Why don't we teach Jack swing? And my question is, why would you, unless you have tree trunk thighs and a pretty hypermobile upper body and left eye dominant and want to hit a towering fade?
Right.
Okay, then. But other than that, I just look at the generalities of what he did,
Right.
how he moved, and especially, like, if you want to really see a striker, a powerful striker, you don't look at where their arms or hands are, or even where the club is. Look at the middle of their body. So he had these really high hands,
Yeah.
but if you look at the middle of him, he was always poised to strike.
Yeah.
So take this back to martial arts now, because martial artists are way more better users of the ground than golfers.
Well, it all comes down to controlling center of mass and balance.
Exactly.
You know,
So
that was the thing in
they're
wrestling is lower your level. You're
yeah,
always taught to lower your level, just like a lineman, right? You can have a 400-pound lineman on one side and a 300-pound lineman on the other side. If that 300-pound lineman gets lower, gets his mass lower than that 400-pounder, the 400-pounder is getting smoked. It's just the way
right.
that it works.
Yeah. So it's all very interesting, and martial artists, I think, are great to watch. The high level martial artists, because they're super efficient. So if you're even in a competitive, say, a points match, or in a real fight, let's say two martial artists, you can't afford to be inefficient. You're going to get clocked. You're going to get killed, because he's going to hit you before you hit him.
Right.
So and I find them very instructive to watch. If you want another example, okay, go on YouTube and pull up any of Joe Louis's fights from
Mm-hmm.
the late 30s, early 40s. The economy of motion is so unbelievable. The guy never threw a wild punch.
Mm-hmm.
His punches traveled 2, 3, 4, 5 inches,
Sure.
and he was laying guys out. He's unbelievable as an example of efficiency of motion.
Yeah. Mike Tyson's
So,
another one. Mike Tyson gets the
yeah,
the the power hook. That's his reputation, but the guy's head motion for a
right,
big guy. I mean, he could move everywhere and he was always tight. He was always controlling his weight. He was always in there. Same thing with the Joe Louis. Very short, very powerful, compact,
right.
all of that energy You know what I mean? Is going in, and he's not leaving anything out on the table. That's why he was so good, man. You know.
Yeah. And so if you look at modern golfers now, the equipment is different enough now that the swings, I think, more resemble one another than in the old days. But you're seeing guys now with, I'll call it lead arm parallel backswing, like John Rahm, Tony Finau, a couple others.
Very
And it's
short.
amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing how they can strike so powerfully from there. And so is the key that their arm is at parallel now? It's what's happening in the middle of their body. The arm is there because for them, that's where it ends up when the middle of the body is loaded.
Right.
Other guys are going to be higher, but really everybody has learned now to be a striker
Right.
and to really maximize. Look at the speed these guys have after the ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. Whereas, I started playing in 1987, so I was hitting persimmon for the first probably quite a few years after I started. And that's different. You're hitting back then, you're hitting a marshmallow with a block of wood.
Right.
Now you're hitting a super ball with a trampoline.
Right.
Yeah. So you don't have to make the long move like a Nicklaus made. It can be more compact. It can be more of a strike and not so much of a swing type thing. But even the long drive guys, like the tendency is to get enamored with some of them, the hugeness of the move, but
Sure.
just look at the middle. And that's where they're striking from. And they never move out of position in the
Right.
middle. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's a term that you probably understand that a lot of instructors don't understand is axial rotation.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that I talk about all the time. And I think now that we can track mass and how guys are controlling their body and using ground forces and creating torque and all that stuff, they're starting to get it. They're starting to get that the really efficient players, the force isn't so much linear and lateral like we thought it used to be, or vertical, like you used to hear about vertical torques, 10 years
Right.
ago. That was the new buzzword. Now it's all about rotational speed. They're finally getting it, and that's what it's been in baseball forever. It's turn, step and turn, step and turn. The
Right.
faster you can turn, the faster you bat speed you can create.
Right. And so then the question becomes, how can you turn faster? And so again, you would sort of maybe think, well, I'll try harder to turn faster.
Right.
But really, you have to learn what efficiency feels like. And it may very well feel like less effort.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing that's kind of surprising. You would think to hit it further, you got to try harder and you got to put more into it. But really, you have to understand that there's a center to it and then let yourself be faster.
Right.
And it'll actually feel like less effort. That's the surprising part.
Yeah. Yeah. I went out right before the PGA show for the first time in a while, and first kind of went out all tactical, and it didn't work out so well. So then I started trying to overpower everything again, like the martial artist and wrestling background. It's like, if you're down, you fight harder, you respond by exerting more force, right? You
Right.
overpower. Golf will humble you in a heartbeat when you get into that that
Yeah.
mindset.
There was a really interesting thing somebody posted on Facebook the other day. So it was a whole paragraph, but all the words, the letters were jumbled. So the only letters that were in each word were in the proper place was the first letter and the last letter of every word. And all the letters in between were scrambled. And I read the paragraph just like I would read a normal paragraph. And then the message at the bottom was, the way the brain assimilates
Right.
this is if the first letter and the last letter are correct, you'll read the word at normal speed. And I thought, and that is actually how the brain assimilates the swing move too.
Mhm.
It senses it as a whole. So I'm not a swing instructor, but I believe that when you try to learn it in parts or teach it in parts, it's much more difficult.
Right.
So the question is, okay, how can we help somebody sense this as a whole? Show them the finish first, put them at the finish first. And that is a great way to teach beginners. You can take someone who's never played golf and show them the finish first and almost teach them the whole, call it the swing move, in reverse engineer it, put them at the finish, pull away, go back, pull away, go back. Man, it clicks so fast.
Right.
And you have a golfer who understands how to move a lot sooner than if you're putting all this input in that has to do with pieces and positions.
Right. Right.
And so we look for, just kind of for fun, at the, I'm careful to stay in my lane. I'm trying to stay in the lane of speed and conditioning.
No, you're in the
But I
right
know,
lane. You're in the right lane. I mean, coming
yeah,
from the instructor's viewpoint, that's my approach too. And and I'm an oddball because of it. I look at the technical side of golf as subsequent to the skill development side. I typically want them to understand, here's how you store energy, here's how you release energy, here's the goal. Let's explore. Right. And we'll go skill to skill to skill. But then when I get into the full swing, when we finally get to that point, I want all, especially with my juniors, I want all out speed. Right. I want all out speed, especially with the golfers that have never done it before, because now all of a sudden they're having to learn self-organization is what Adam Young calls it. I just call it self-discovery, but self-organization is, I think, the term that most guys in the golf industry have probably learned. And I think that's a huge benefit to the Mach 3 training, again, because they're feeling it. They're getting that flow right out of the gate. So that's actually a good segue. How does Mach 3 work for a golfer who's never played before? That's your next adventure for Mach 3, right?
That is one of them. Yeah, we're going to have an entire program which will be, movement based. And so in learning how to move, we've touched on it several times. We want to put them at the finish first.
Right.
And so the program, that every single exercise and drill and pattern is actually going to start at the finish and come back and forth, but starting at the finish, because it makes it so much easier.
Yeah.
It's almost comical. Like, we've had raw beginners in here and their progress in the first 15 minutes is so fast that we laugh. Right. It's like, my God, like years ago, probably would have taken us 2 weeks to get to that point right there. And there's from my profession, the fitness side of it and the conditioning side, it's a huge reward to be able to take a beginner and teach them how to move for a couple weeks and then hand them off to an instructor, because that instructor's getting a whole different animal than the normal beginner. They're getting somebody that knows how to move. You get somebody who knows how to move, and it makes you feel like a genius.
Sure. But
it's not. It's just we had a boxing coach in here one time. He'd never played golf in his life. 15 minutes. This guy's swing on film looked like a tour player, because we went off the basis of how to throw an uppercut. Okay. So I said to him, I want you to teach me how to throw an uppercut, but I want you to show me the finish first, and then after that, you do whatever you want. So he taught me how to throw an uppercut. And then we had him practice uppercuts and then put the club in his hand at the end of the uppercut. And he just reverse engineered the whole thing. And I mean, it was like I was watching Jason Day or somebody, I was like, and then we had him hit into the net, and he's just pounding balls into the net like a veteran golfer. And I'm like, that's awesome. There's really something to this. That's awesome. And the key is, don't be afraid of something like that once you've proven that it works to yourself. And I would say this to any golfer in any part of the game. If you've proven to yourself that something works, don't let anybody talk you out of it. Right. You've got to own the skill that is helping you, and you have no obligation to let somebody talk you out of it.
That's right. That's right. And that's a lot of the logical technical search for the perfect swing is why golfers won't own it ever, because they are on a constant search for that perfect swing that's going to, again, help them plot it around the course. That's that perfect stock shot that they're just going to be able to plot around the course all day long. That might work for some people, but I need to be able to adapt to every, because inevitably, again, like you were saying earlier, you're going to have a ball that's 4, 5, 6 inches below your feet, above your feet, side hill lie, downhill lie. You're going to have different turf conditions, wind conditions. I mean, different targets, different shapes around dog legs that you're going to have to hit. It just, it's counterintuitive to how we really train, I think. And
Yeah.
I think the mainstream instruction community is starting to get that. The psychology research that's been done, the stat tracking that we now have, obviously the access to the players and the different coaches that are willing to tell people what's working. I mean, we're waking up. I think we're going to start seeing now. I think we're going to start seeing larger chunks come off of that average national handicap list that's been stuck right around that 16 to 18. I'd like to see it. Technology's come a long way. We should see some fruit from it at least.
Yeah. Yeah. The main impediment to that, I always say, is because the hole is really small.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
no matter what you do, in the end, you're putting a 6 or a 10 or a 20 or a 50-foot putt, and the hole is just small. You can hit great putts and they just don't go in. So it can be hard to get the average down in the end. But certainly, one thing we always tell the kids is, look, you don't have to be the longest hitter out there,
Right.
but you have to be long enough for your level. So let's start at the top, the PGA Tour. If you're much below 295 now,
You
it
have a
is
really
going to
hard
be
time. Yeah.
really hard to win. Corn Ferry guys are even longer than PGA Tour players. Collegiate, male collegiate golfers. I mean, the guys we have in here, they're over 180 ball speed.
Yeah.
So they all know their levels too. Then if you take it down to, say, collegiate females and high school females, they all have a threshold. They've got to get it out there too. And then all the other parts of the game become so much more relevant. But one issue is, if you say distance is the most important part of the game, which I believe, people interpret that as you're saying putting is not important.
Right.
Short
You
game
and
is
I have
not
had that
important. You're
little
not saying that at
controversy.
all.
You
Yeah.
and I have
Yeah.
had that
But
controversy. You got to
yeah.
have
So
both.
so if you have a guy whose short game is better than Seve Ballesteros and he hits it 260 off the tee, you will never see him on the PGA Tour.
Right.
You'll never know who he is. He won't be there because
Right.
he's not at the threshold. The bare minimum threshold probably out there, say 285. And but even then you're giving away 30 yards to the top guys.
Right.
And I mean,
That's
one more
awfully
thing I'll
hard to
say,
make up
like,
for in the approach shot.
yeah, if you want to know the importance of distance at elite levels, don't ask me. Ask the guys who are out there.
Right.
Ask PGA Tour players or Corn Ferry or Latin American Tour or collegiate. Ask them, what's the threshold and how important is it? They'll tell you. So nobody has to care what I think. I don't even care what I think. Right? I it's not my opinion that matters. Ask them. They will tell you the truth, that they cannot give away 15, 20, 25 yards and expect to ever beat anybody.
Right. Right. All right. We've got 5 minutes to close out. I want you to plug everything again towards the end, but this is an important question because I've got some females that I've worked with. I've got one in particular who is tearing it up. She is let's see, last year as a sophomore, she won the SMAC. You know what SMAC is because you're a Maryland guy.
Mm-hmm.
She won SMAC as a sophomore in Charles County. And as a girl, right, took on all those boys. She came to me the first time at Breton Bay. I don't know if you've ever been down there and played in St. Mary's. Breton Bay was my first country club.
Yeah, I played
So
it one time.
yeah, that's a player's track, man. Beautiful track down there on the water. But for the lady golfers, okay, speed, right? And especially efficiency and gaining some speed, that's probably the biggest segment of golf that could benefit from some speed training. What do you say to those ladies that are looking to grow?
Yeah, so they're my favorites, and they're my personal focus in the stuff that we do. I focus most on middle school, high school, and collegiate females, and especially the teams like college teams and high school teams. So for them, uh, every collegiate female golf coach and high school too, there's two things that they want. Don't hurt my girls,
Mm-hmm.
and give them something that they love to do. Because we know if they put in the work, and with the concept of speed out in front, they're going to get faster and they're going to get longer. Now, we also do want them to be able to train moving forward. So how do we not hurt them? And so now we circle all the way back to the beginning, where we don't ask them to be explosive. We show them how to be efficient, and we give them a way of working out that is really fun. So slinging the ropes around is actually really fun, mm-hmm. compared to going in the gym and doing planks and doing kneeling cable chops and stuff like that. So it boils back down again to a system that's intuitive, a system where you can watch somebody else do it and go, oh yeah, I get that. That's obvious. I should be doing that, that kind of thing. And so the most rewarding moments for me are when a college coach emails me or calls and says, my girls love this stuff. Because what does that mean? It means they're going to come in 2 or 3 times a week and keep doing it. So beyond what they get from speed out in front, they'll get more eventually from being in better and better shape, being strong in the right patterns. So it's been a big focus of mine from the beginning, because when I moved here, there were 3 high school girls here in this town who were good players and got scholarships and went away to their new schools, and they were all injured within the first 2 weeks of training with the football guy, mm-hmm. who was also training the golf team or whatever. And that should never happen. And I do get pushback on this when I say you should never get hurt training for golf. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, it's inevitable that if you're training for speed or if you're working out hard, you're going to get hurt. It's not inevitable. This is not football.
Right.
It's not rugby. This is not mixed martial arts.
Right. Right. Yeah. I always had that problem doing it with buddies of mine that wanted to go in and lift weights with me doing the bodybuilding. Like if I couldn't do 5, that's my minimum. You know, I'm Joe Weider, old school, you know, yeah. Rigno, Arnold. If I can't do 5 in my sets, the risk goes up exponentially.
Right.
Below 5 sets. And that was another thing. I got so big in college, like I had to stop and get into supersetting and all that stuff. And, you know, again, flexibility for me, you know, just yoga, regular stretching regimens, because a lot of people already have the strength, to your point earlier. They just don't know how to access it and apply it. So right. Again, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Go ahead and plug for us again. Let us know what your sites are. It's mach3speedtraining.com. Right. We plugged the Power Bomber already. Let's plug one more product.
Yeah, the Speed Bomber was the number one that I would pick. We have a tool called a Jet Stick,
okay,
which is the one that I would call pure speed. And in fact, it's the only tool that we swing as fast as we can.
Okay.
Then we have a variety of tools that have long ropes attached, and they have different types of handles, and they have cool names. They the Velociraptor, the Mamba, the Shallow Stick, the Crusher.
Awesome.
So those tools are all what I would call patterning and developing strength in relevant patterns, and they have a high conditioning effect too. Right. So what happens when
everything over there? I'll plug everything down in the bottom and send them on your
way. And when somebody buys any tools from our website, within 12 hours you'll get links to videos with all the drills, and a PDF that has sample beginner, intermediate, and advanced workout. So that's how, you know, any golfer could get Mach 3 tools and use them. Now we also we do workshops all over the country, and we do them here in San Antonio, both for golfers and for coaches. So on our website, there's a workshops tab, and by clicking on that, you'd be able to see anything coming up that might be in your area. or you could just email me, and my email is michael@mach3speedtraining.com. And, so arrangements can be made in a lot of different ways.
Okay, awesome. Now, are you accessible for people who want to fly you out on their private jets and help them pick up 42 miles an hour?
Oh, okay. I'll do it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, awesome. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate the chat again. Speed is obviously always a hot topic in the golf world. So, I wanted to make sure I got somebody on here when we brought that up, for the first episode. This is the first one. I brought on a specialist for each topic, and you were my guy for this. I've watched you for a couple
Cool.
years. I love the before and after videos. I always thought you were a PGA professional, though, man.
Yeah,
So,
no, I purely from a fitness background. Yeah. And I'm kind of glad because I think my job's easier than that of a golf professional.
yeah, you
You
get to
know?
help them go fast and make them happy. And then when they're chunking it, they come to us and want to tell us why we suck. So,
Yeah, you have the hard part. Yeah.
awesome, man. Well, I hope to see you again soon. It was, again, a great conversation, and I will make sure to plug everything down below. And I look forward to having you on again, maybe sometime.
Awesome. I would love it. Thank you.
There's